Council Audit Committee to order for February the 11th at 1:00 p.m. Machine is open for roll call. Let the record reflect that Ms. Newberry has not joined us yet and that Mr. Duke is here representing the Audit Department. And we have two directors here, Mr. Epley, and the Director of Administration as well. I think maybe somebody's coming. Let the record reflect that Ms. Newberry has joined us. And at this time, we'll ask Ms. Marcotte to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me thank you all for being here, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Epley, for representing your department. And I see Ms. Hughes is in the back representing the Community Action Agency. At this time, we'll move on to item 2.
2A, review of the Community Action Agency Internal Audit Report.
This time, we'll turn it over to Mr. Duke and ask Mr. Duke to pull the mic to him and speak into the mic clearly, please.
Government's Community Action Agency, project number 2021-09. Internal audit observations. Observation number 1, Policies and Procedures Manual COSO Framework. Recommendations. A risk assessment should be performed and documented throughout the year to reduce the risk that a negative event could happen to the parish and/or Community Action Department. In addition, the internal auditor recommends that the parish establish a policy and procedure manual that encompasses all parish departments and other entities of the parish. This manual could provide training for new employees and provide parish directives to all employees to help ensure that parish objectives and goals are being met. Management response. Ms. Taylor states, Ms. Hughes stated that the CAA does have checks and balances in place, but there's always room for improvement, and that can happen with the adoption of the Risk Assessment COSO framework. Ms. Hughes states she spoke with the internal auditor regarding the risk assessment policy back in August of 2020. She stated that she wanted to know that if the local government had a risk assessment manual with policy and procedures in place. I mentioned to her that one of the organizational standards for community services block grant was a risk assessment policy. She stated in Standard 4.6 that the department complies with local government's risk assessment policies and procedures. I stated that I was working on with the parish to approve the COSO framework as a PPG policy. The parish adopted the risk assessment COSO framework on January 14th, 2021. The policies and procedures were not included. She states that she's in favor of the risk assessment with policies and procedures. She suggests that the parish have a comprehensive policy and procedure manual for the entire parish, not just the departmental risk assessment.
Does that complete your comments?
That completes it for the community action. Yes, sir.
This is the follow-up. After reviewing the follow-up audit on the Community Action Agency, which this is,
Yes, sir.
it appears to me that there's a good bit of oversight from different agencies outside of the parish as well.
There is.
And so it seems like the Community Action Agency is doing a very good job with its monitoring and oversight and implementation of its financial policies. So I want to commend them for a good job You're doing a good job, Mr. Values, and the oversight and the comments from the outside agencies are well taken.
It should also be stated that risk is reduced because they're on a cost reimbursement basis of accounting.
Yeah, I noticed that language in the audit. And are there any comments, other comments from the members of the audit committee on this item?
No, I just agree with you, Mr. Russo.
Thank you.
I agree also.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor and Ms. Hughes, for this cooperation on this audit. Move on to the next item.
B, review of the port contracts and agreements, follow-up internal report.
Plaquemines Parish Port Harbor and Terminal District follow-up internal audit report of the port's contracts and agreements, internal audit project number 2021-01. Observation number 1, Port Committee, ordinance number 15-164, Rule 4C. Recommendations. It seems inefficient to comply with Parish Ordinance 15-164 that states port-related business and other matters should be first considered by the Port Committee, then brought to the table for full council consideration. During the port meeting, all port-related business and other matters could be considered. Consider revising the current ordinance or eliminating the Port Committee meetings. Status of the internal audit recommendations and management response. On March 14th, 2019, the Port Board adopted Ordinance 1932, which eliminated the Port Committee. Observation number 2, the Marina Group, LLC. Recommendations. Consider hiring an in-house grant administrator. Consider hiring an in-house attorney. For review of contracts, consider the Louisiana auditor's best practice. Legal requirement checklist should be prepared, signed off by legal, the port, and attached to the contract. Policy contract requirement checklist should be prepared or could be prepared and signed by the person responsible and attached to the contract. Ensure that separate individuals sign, date, and witness the contract. Also ensure that liability insurance certificates are current. Status of the internal audit recommendations and management responses. The port added a senior accountant 2 position to its manpower table in 2020 to fulfill grant administrative duties. The position was filled in-house through promotion, which left senior accountant 1 vacant. Due to the pandemic, the port did promote the senior accountant 1 was left vacant. The position was filled in-house, through promotion, which left the senior accountant 1 vacant. Due to the pandemic, the port did not fill the position in 2020. The vacant position was defunded by the Port Board for 2021. Director of Finance plans to request a position to be added back. The cost benefit of hiring a in-house attorney versus outside law firm with a team of attorneys has been evaluated. During the development stage at which the port is at, an outsourced legal department benefits outweigh those of a staffed attorney. All other administrative recommendations are being performed in accordance with the port's accounting policies, which were last updated on December 10th, 2020. Observation number 3, Trident Holdings Incorporated. Audit recommendations. The consultant's invoices and timesheets should have more itemized detail and explanation. The work order or task order could be attached to the timesheet to support the consultant's time billed. The timesheet should be signed, dated by the consultant, indicating that information is valid and accurate. Consultant's mileage expenses should be supported by MapQuest. Ensure that insurance certificates are current. Review the contracts in accordance with the legislative auditor's best practice. Legal requirement checklist could be prepared and signed by, or should be prepared, signed by legal and the port and attached to the contract. Ensure that contracts over $50,000 goes through a competitive or bid process, RFQ and RFP, if applicable. The policy contract requirement checklist should be prepared, signed by the person responsible and attached. Ensure task orders are signed and dated by the consultant and the port as required by the contract. Status of audit recommendations. As of May 9th, 2020, the port no longer has professional service agreement with Trent. During 2019, more details and recommended supporting details were supplied with invoices. A checklist requirement has been added to the port policies. Observation number 4, Intermat LLC recommendations. The executive director should sign and date all contracts. All contracts should be witnessed and dated. Consultants' invoices and timesheets should be more itemized. Timesheets should be signed off on to ensure validity and accuracy. A work order, task order should be attached to the consultant's bill. The consultant's mileage expenses should be supported by MapQuest. Ensure the certificates are current. Legal review of the contracts, pay attention to the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's best practice. Legal requirement checklist should be prepared. Policy contract checklist should be prepared as well. Status is the port no longer has a contract with Intermat LLC. Due to modification of the project, the port has implemented additional procedures to ensure that documents are reviewed by legal. Observation number 5, contracts under $50,000. Recommendation of the council should adopt an ordinance or resolution that clearly outlines the council's position and policies regarding contracts under $50,000. The status on July 24th, 2020, the Port Board adopted Ordinance 2077, which requires all professional service contracts follow a set of solicitation steps prior to the council approval. Observation number 6, Aries Security Corporation doing business as the Marina Group LLC. Recommendations. The port director should sign and date all contracts. There should be 2 witnesses that date the contract. Consultant invoices should have more detail. Supporting documentation, work orders, tax orders should be submitted with more detail from the consultant. The consultant's timesheet should always be signed off on and dated for validity and accuracy purposes. Legal review of the contracts, pay attention to best practice by the LLA. Legal requirement checklist should be prepared, signed by legal and the port. Pay attention to the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's bid practices for contracts $50,000 or less. Policy contract requirement checklist should be prepared, signed off on. Status is the port no longer has a professional service agreement with Marina Group due to the expiration of the contract. In 2020, the port began a procurement policy review project that will address a number of issues regarding contracts in the public bid law. Ordinance 2077 also adds a competitive atmosphere for professional service agreements. Observation 7, Vickerman and Associates LLC. Recommendations. The agreement, again, should be signed off on. Make sure we have 2 witnesses. The agreement should include required contract content by the port, signability clause, anti-discrimination language. A policy contract requirement checklist should be attached to the contract. Contract should be in accordance with Louisiana best practice. Legal requirement checklist should be prepared and signed off on, attached to the contract. Pay attention to 50,000, contracts 50,000 or less, adhere to Louisiana LLA bid law, best practice. The port should pay all invoices on time to avoid penalty charges. V&A timesheet should be signed and dated. V&A travel expense report should be signed and dated. V&A receipts for meals should have more detail. The item purchased should include, the receipt should include the business purpose, identify the person and the persons who made the purchase. Status is the port no longer has contract with Vickerman and Associates due to budget limits. Policy amendments made in 2019-2020 was made to implement the auditor's recommendations. Number 8, Gary LaGrange and Associates. Recommendations. The agreement should clearly state and define services that the consultant will provide to the port on an as-needed basis. The agreement should be signed and dated by the consultant. There should be witness signatures on the agreement. The agreement should have an assignability and anti-discrimination language. A policy contract checklist should be signed and attached to the contract. The consultant's invoiced hours should be compared to the consultant's expense report hours, and they should match. Differences should be reconciled. Consultant should only pay for hours they actually worked. Consultant's expense report or timesheet should always be signed and dated by the consultant. Dealing with contracts, pay attention to the appearance of the business transaction, especially if there's a close relationship. Make sure that contracts are arm's length transactions. When dealing with contracts, pay close attention to the LLA best practice. Review of contracts, use the LLA best practice guidelines. A legal requirement checklist should be prepared by the board and attached to the contract. Pay attention to LLA for contracts less than $50,000. Adhere to the best practices and under the bid law topic. Status of the recommendations. Port no longer has a contract with LaGrange and Associates due to the expiration of the contract. Policy amendments made in 19 and 20 was made to implement the auditor's recommendations. Port management will pay more attention to the nature of the transactions they enter into to ensure that the transaction and the contract is arm's length. Observation number 9, print all LLA consulting. Ensure that consultants' professional education, business qualifications, and experience in the areas of marketing, public relations, government relations are submitted and considered and reviewed. Ensure that contract states a maximum amount and an end date for the time period of the contract or terms of the contract. The agreement should state the work to be performed, including the goals and objectives, deliverables, performance measures, and monitoring plan. The agreement should state a termination clause, remedies for default, anti-discrimination clause, and signed by witnesses. The agreement should be dated by the port's executive director and by the owner of print all. There should be evidence of current insurance coverage and legal review. For contracts less than $50,000, make sure we adhere to the public bid laws guidelines. The port checklist, status of the recommendations. Port checklist covers the auditor's recommendations currently being used by the administration. Ordinance 2077 creates a competitive atmosphere for professional service agreements. Auditor's recommendations have been considered when developing new contracts. This contract was unfunded for 2021 budget year. And finally, observation number 10, Printall LLC, consultancy, materials, and supplies. Recommendations, ensure consultants' professional education qualifications, went over that. The agreement should state the goals and objectives, we went over that. The agreement should state the remedies for default and the description shall all be dated. The agreement should be dated by the port's executive, and a lot of this we've gone over. There should be evidence of current insurance and legal review. Contracts less than $50,000 should adhere to the public Louis LLA guidelines. The timesheets submitted for marketing communication work should be signed and dated by the consultant. Payment should be made based upon approved timesheets to support these costs. Timesheets should be signed and dated. Public bid law should adhere. Anything less than $50,000 should adhere to the best practices. Status. The port's checklist covers the auditor's recommendations currently being used by the administration. Ordinance 2077 creates the competitive atmosphere through these professional service contracts. The auditor's recommendations have been considered when developing new contracts, and this contract was also defunded for the 2021 year. That concludes the port, sir.
But any,
It seems like, did you find the contract that they followed the rules?
Very, very few at that time.
So is they just doing what they want over there? And
At that time, we had a lot of issues. Right, yes, sir. We had a lot of issues. We need to do another audit down the road.
and
But I'm sure that according to what I've seen during the follow-up, they're doing everything that I suggested they're doing now, which is a lot.
any other comments? Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Konovich. all of these reports, I mean, these findings or recommendations are basically just sloppy paperwork, not signing and dating contracts, not getting insurance certificates. So I'm hoping that they
I
are.
don't really understand how a lot of these contracts could have passed through their attorney.
And we paying him $150,000 a year to
Yeah, it
look over.
doesn't make a lot of sense, but,
What does he look over?
yeah. Especially if you don't have witnesses and, that it's not signed by the executive director, et cetera. So anyway, it does look like they've cleaned up their act.
Mr. Duke,
Yes, ma'am.
did you get a copy of their policy on how they handle these contracts? Or do they have a policy in place? Did you look into that?
The current policy, I did have their policy and procedures when I did the audit, yes.
So did they not follow their own policies, or we just don't have policies in place?
Well, their policies and procedures, they were following, but they were incomplete.
Gotcha. Okay, I know they're going through a procurement process, and it's something that we definitely need to follow up with.
That's probably the reason for that, more than likely.
Thank you.
They probably
Through a
felt vulnerable.
procurement
I would
process,
think.
we should have went through an audit, contract process first, because the port doesn't buy anything but paper and pencils.
Right. Yeah, yes, sir.
Well, I noticed that, the recommendations about the attorney, and I know my colleagues on the board here know my frustration with the utilization of the port attorney. The last two meetings that I've been on, the port attorney has been on by Zoom or by telephone. And I know that, there's no comment, no input in the meetings that I've attended, so I'm not sure why we're letting him sit on the phone and bill us.
Yeah,
And
that's-
my
that was
point
my
is that, and I made this very clear to some of my colleagues, that when we run out of the $125,000 that we have in the budget, and there's a request for more funding, I'm going to be arguing against it, and I'm going to be upset that we haven't managed the attorney's time better than what we are managing it currently. And when I brought it up to the administration in the last meeting I was in, the answer was, Mr. Russo, we are building a port. And I took offense to that because I understand what you're trying to do, but you have not succeeded. But it does not mean that you have to be wasteful and inconsiderate of the advice that your contract calls for from a board member. And my advice to them is not to utilize the attorney unless it's a legal matter, not to sit on the phone and just adhere to listening. I mean, if we need some legal advice, then I agree we need an attorney. But I haven't seen the value of them on these phone calls.
My audit does seem to me, and I spoke with them during the exit conference, but they evaluated whether they needed an in-house attorney or not, and they said that the cost benefit would not be there. But I don't know I just don't think I agree with that.
But we don't know what the cost benefit is if we didn't have the real necessary cost. We don't know what the true value
And what the
of legal
attorney's doing,
advice that we're
actually.
getting.
Yeah.
So, it's a pet peeve of mine, and I've been raising it for quite some time, and I'll continue to raise it until I see that it's corrected.
Okay, sounds good.
Any further comment on this item?
Those-
Hearing none, we'll move to the next.
2C, review of the PPG contracts and agreements follow-up internal audit report.
Follow-up of internal audit report of the Plaquemines Parish Government PPG Contracts and Agreements Project Number 2021-02. Observations, PPG Master List of Contracts and Agreements and a centralized oversight location. Recommendation, the PPG Master List of Contracts and Agreements should be monitored and updated as necessary. The parish president and parish council should approve the master list of contracts and agreements and the selection of legal departments as a centralized oversight location for contracts, agreements, and supporting documents. Status, PPG now maintains a master list of contracts. Observation number 2, Contract and Agreement Policies and Procedures Manual. Recommendation, a PPG contract and agreement written policy manual should be established and approved by the parish council, president, and the council. The LLA best practice can be used as guidance for writing the contracts and agreements manual. Status of internal audit recommendations and management responses. There is no contract manual. However, PPG has recently revised its public works agreements and associated documents. PPG is actively in the process of revising other dated agreement templates, including professional service agreements. Due to shrinking resources and taking on new cases previously handled by outside counsel, PPG Legal does not have the time to write contracts manually, nor does PPG think it's worth the effort. Observation number 3, contract and agreement deliverable checklist. Ensure that a contract and agreement deliverable checklist or a progress report showing the status of the contracts and the agreement deliverables is prepared. Status of the recommendations and response. PPG has implemented the recommendation. Observation number 4, standard contract and agreement form. Recommendation, ensure that a standard PPG form for contracts and agreements is being used. Status, PPG uses standard contract clauses in most of its agreements, such as the right to audit, insurance compensation, indemnity, and other clauses, but PPG does not use standard forms. Standard forms would be overly cumbersome and impractical for the myriad of agreements PPG enters into. Observation number 5. BIOS Technology Insight Management IT Agreement. Recommendations. Contracts should not be automatically renewed without going before the council for review, approval, providing each member with a contract progress report. Ensure compliance with Louisiana Revised Statute RS 39-1624 consulting agreements. Ensure compliance with LLA best practice bid process, Parish Ordinance number 01161 and number 08170, and include in the Plaquemines Parish Charter, Section 7.06, which deals with the administration of operating budget and capital budgets. Parish Ordinances number 01 and 161 and 08170 seem to be outdated. An audit clause should be written in the contract, and copies of liability insurance certificates should be in the file. Status, LRS 39-1621 is applicable to state government, not PPG. The current PPG administration does not enter into agreements for a period in excess of 2 years. PPG agrees to the right to audit clause should be in all agreements. Observation 6, review of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, DOTD Bollinger Quick Repair, LLC contractor. Recommendation, a right to audit clause should be in the contract. Obtain copies of the bid documents and insurance certificates for our files. Since this project was funded by DOTD, the bid was done pursuant to rules and regulations established by DOTD. All documents with the bid are public record and subject to audit. Observation 7, Lake Heritage Water Line Relocation, Infinity Engineering Consultants, LLC. Recommendation, ensuring compliance with Louisiana Revised Statute RS 39-162 on consulting agreements, LA best practice, bid process, including the parish ordinances number 01161 and number 08170, and the parish charter section 7.06, administration of operating budget and capital budget, and also ensure a right to audit clause in the contract. The status, LARS 39-1621 is applicable to the state, not PPG. The current PPG administration cannot account for what happened 215 beyond the explanation provided by engineering. Observation number 8, Plaquemines Parish Courthouse, Point a la Hash, Lamar Contractors, LLC. Recommendation, ensure that a contracting rating sheet and evaluations are in the contractor bid files. Ensure compliance with parish ordinances. PPG shall keep all grading sheets electronically or a hard copy as part of its files. Observation number 9, Buras Volunteer Fire Department, Pratt Landry Associates Incorporated, Fire Security Alarm Monitor Agreement, the Red Hawk Fire Security. Recommendation, contracts should not be automatically renewed without going before the council. Ensure contract signatures are dated. Ensure compliance with RS 39-162. Ensure compliance with parish ordinances. Ensure certificates are in the contract. The right to audit clause is written in the contract. LRS 39621 is applicable to state, not PPG. PPG agrees that all contracts should be properly dated, insurance certificates should be part of the file, and we should have a right to audit clause included. Finally, we have observation number 10, Woodlawn Canal, Rogers Canal, Timer Canal, Suzie Bayou, and Deer Range Canal Coastal Dredging Company, Inc. Recommendation, ensure contract signatures are dated. Rating sheets should, for each of the five contractors, should be in the contractor's bid files that's provided to the auditor. A right to audit clause should be written in compliance with parish ordinances. PPG agrees with the rating sheets and the right to audit clause as part of the contract. That concludes the follow-up audit on PPG contracts.
Any comments before I make mine?
No, sir.
I do.
Ms. Newberry?
Yeah, I guess this one's for Mr. Epley. When we do a contract, do we have a checklist? Does the parish have a checklist that they have to follow to make sure we are in compliance with all these recommendations or any ordinances maybe that need to be put in place to have all this done? Or y'all just create these contracts and just go with the flow? I mean, I'm just trying to get an insight here on how y'all handle that process.
That's something that's handled through legal, so I don't know what the process is. I don't know if they have a checklist or do not have a checklist. Any contracts that I've had have been sent to legal, and legal's the one that handles it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Newberry, because I think it's a prevalent problem throughout most of the audits about a checklist.
Yes, sir.
And I believe that if the checklist was there, a lot of the findings or observations in the audit itself would disappear because they would have to check that off on the box and not making the bid package and the contract complete.
Yes, sir. When I spoke with the LLA a while back about contracts, they were very adamant about having a checklist for deliverables for every single contract. That was the first thing, and they pounded on that for maybe 10 minutes when I spoke to them. Every single contract should have the deliverables checked off. We receive this until the termination of the contract.
And that, to me, though, that is a separate checklist than the compliance with the contracting law.
Yes, sir, it is.
So in other words, if we were to go in and ask for contract ABC, and we pull that contract, there should be a checklist attached to it that said they had the bid bond, so forth, the insurance, all of those things that require them to comply with that contract. And then the separate checklist that you're talking about are the deliverables, correct?
Yes.
So we separate that into two different checklists, basically?
Yes, sir. But I guess, I was getting ahead of myself, but you're exactly correct. All the items that I mentioned in my audit, we should have a checklist on. And such as the rating sheets, the bid process, everything should, when I ask for a contract, I expect to see, my expectations is to see a folder with the contract and all of this information, current insurance, rating sheets, bid process, everything attached to it. And that way I don't have to, go through a lot of these things that I've gone through in these audits.
But the point is that if you get a checklist on the top of the package, and you'll know this is in there, you can open the package up and say, yes, it is.
It makes it so much easier to audit. But we still need to make sure, and I think the delivery, what do we receive? What are we receiving when we pay these contracts? We make sure we're receiving the deliverables that we're supposed to be getting. That's very crucial, of course.
Would the audit committee or Mr. Duke like to send a draft of a checklist that they would like to be used over to the administration so we could look about and see about using it?
Well, excuse me, the way this works, we audit your work. I think Mr. Duke wouldn't want to get into a position, and we've avoided this position of trying to direct the administration as to how, they do their job. We just audit it after the fact.
I understand.
And so, if you send a checklist to us, Mr. Duke will evaluate it, we'll comment on it, and send it back.
Sure.
There's a fine line between the auditor can get in a lot of trouble for acting as management. I should never be a part of management. I'm supposed to be independent, and once I become a part of management, I lose my independence, and the whole audit process goes out the window.
Yes, and so we've tried to steer clear of that and been very successful over the years of making sure that we do not become part of that management, because then I don't repeat it, but you're right. Okay, any further comments? One comment I was going to make, Ms. Newberry, you complete?
Yes.
This Suzie Bayou contract, or they call it the Suzie Bayou, but it's the Woodland Canal Row House and so forth, also this dredging contract. It's my understanding that this contract is not going to be fulfilled because of the lack of a suitable spoil area. And since there's only been $62,000 spent on that contract, I think we need the administration to come forward and tell us what they're going to do with that contract, whether they're going to try to comply with it, cancel it, or whatever the status is going to be, so we will know. So if one of you directors would bring that to the administration and tell them we'd like to get to the bottom of that contract, because what that does is that frees up a considerable amount of money that could be utilized probably on the Jesuit Bend levee, as an example. If we're not going to do the dredging, it could be used on a few other projects that we're sitting here looking for money for. And I know that in Ms. Newberry's district in the Jesuit Bend area and Mr. Blink's district, there are some serious issues that are coming about because of base flood elevation and the lack of the 100-year protection, and this might be an effort to try to help in some way. But anyway, it's just a thought, and we'd like to get a little status on where we stand with that, if you don't mind. Any other comments on this audit? Hearing none. We'll move to the next one, please. Thank you.
2D, a review of the PPG Water Department follow-up internal audit report.
Plaquemines Parish Government Water Department Follow-Up Internal Audit Report, Project Number 2021-03. Observation number 1, workforce and staffing issues. Recommendation. The Water Department's billing and collection process is a critical component of Plaquemines Parish government staffing and should be a major concern. Proper staffing, along with implementing a better billing and collection software system, is needed. The installation of the AMI electric meters should help to improve the billing and collection process. The department should take training classes in management, accounting, technology, and customer service if necessary. The status: all positions have been filled. Observation number 2, customer checks and cash collections. Scan customer checks to the bank, eliminate cash, and only accept credit cards, money orders, checks, and online payments. Status: we have encouraged customers to not use cash, as shown in the attached summaries. Observation number 3, paperless digital system. Recommendation: implement a paperless digital system. Shred unimportant documents and scan all important paper documents into either the Plaquemines Parish Government Server or into Laserfish Management Database. Implement a new updated software billing and collection system. The advantages are as follows: cost savings. Keeping everything stored in a digital format, whether in computer drives, flash drives, or in cloud-based systems, is cheaper than printing and storing it on paper. This eliminates cost of shredding, services for paperwork with sensitive information. Some businesses have entire rooms and storage units devoted to archiving paper. Paperless systems eliminates this cost. Speed of information. When everything is stored digitally versus on paper and files, accessibility becomes quick and easy. Employees, consumers, and business owners have access to all data, contracts, and consumer files with just a few mouse clicks. This eliminates having to locate the file or form, which saves everyone time. Status: still working to eliminate paper. Will be better when the AMI project is completed. Observation 4, public record retention. Recommendation: the Water Department should be in compliance with RS 4436 as stated below. And that just talks about the law relating to that. And the status of that is We're following the RS 4436 record retention, revised statute 4436. Observation 5, billing estimates. Recommendation, billing estimates should be made in accordance with Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana Code Ordinance, Chapter 22, Section 22-15. Estimating customer water bills should occur when a meter is defective or if the meter cannot be read due to the fault of the customer. Status, estimates are down now since staffing is better and more e-meters are being installed. Customer complaints. Recommendation, customers are complaining that meters are not being read and have high water bills without explanation. The installation of the AMI electric system meter and reducing the amount of billing estimates, as stated in recommendation number 5, should help with these types of customer complaints. Status, I will follow up on the complaints. Most are due to postal service. Observation 7, new software system. The water department could purchase a new upgraded billing and collection system that can be upgraded or integrated with Plaquemines Parish Government New World Financial System. The New World Financial System appears to be the standard financial system for the parish and could be or should be used by all departments. Status, software is being updated by AMI. Observation number 8, Aquametric Sales Company. Recommendation, there should be a centralized location to maintain the contract and RFP documentation. The documentation should be maintained in a file that's organized and accessible in a timely manner. Status, legal is handling the RFP documents and the centralized location. Observation 9, delinquent accounts. Recommendation, aggressive action to collect delinquent accounts, including legal action when necessary, should be taken, including the hiring of a collection agency. The entity's cutoff policy procedures should ensure that all delinquent accounts are collected on a timely basis or that service is discontinued and being enforced. Continuing to provide services after the cutoff date and not actively trying to collect delinquent utility accounts could be a violation of Article 7, Section 14A of the Constitution. Status, there are many delinquent accounts due to the COVID no disconnect orders. Observation number 10, deposit reports. Recommendation, the Water Department should be certifying on this report the amount of deposits received by all districts that have cleared the bank. The total of the deposits plus the amount shown in the General Ledger Pooled or Gateway Report should equal the bank deposits. A reconciliation should be made between the total deposits that clear the bank and the Water Department's books or closing reports. Any differences should be shown as a reconciling item or adjustment. The reason for the adjustment should be explained. For example, the deposit report on 12/21/17 showed the following. See attachment A. I certify that the funds aggregating $991.64 represents deposits received from all districts. Okay, the bank deposits should report $991.64. The closing reports should reported this is the way it should be. The closing reports reported $962.29. The adjustment $29.35 with an explanation for the adjustment. Response. Deposits are being certified now. Observation number 11, budgets. Ensure that employees perform their duties within the department that they've been hired for and budgeted for. All employees are in their budgeted positions. Observation 12, Severn, Trent Environmental Services, Inframark. Recommendation, there should be a centralized location to maintain the RFP documentation. Documentation should be in a file and organized and accessible. This is being handled by legal. Status of the recommendation, Inframark is in compliance with their contract. Observation 13, best practice. Have a lot of guidelines that the Louisiana Legislative Auditor puts out for this type of work. The Water Department should consider the benefits of putting these procedures in place. The status is, I have not done written procedures for best practice. Water produced versus water billed is looked at monthly, and the difference is due to flushing to keep chlorine levels acceptable. That concludes the water department. That concludes all of the reviews for this meeting.
Any comments or questions on the PPG Water Department follow-up internal audit? Any comments from Mr. Epley? Or Ms.
I have.
Okay, Ms. Newberry?
I'm looking, go ahead.
Mr. Konovich?
I've been getting complaints about people that called the water department about their bills, say they being talked to rudely and all. And I know it goes both ways, but said they can't get no help when they call the department.
Yes, sir. We have had that. That has been a problem. Our employees are not the friendliest, but there are employees, and we're working on it a little at a time to try to change that attitude. They have all been advised that if they have a customer that they cannot help, to give them my phone number, and they refer them to me, and I can get on the phone with them and talk to them. And sometimes I can't help them, but I do the best that I can.
I understand that. Like I said, it goes both ways, because I get the calls too, and
Yes,
I'm
sir.
short temper. Like,
Yes, sir.
Do y'all record those complaints?
Do we record the phone calls? No, ma'am.
So you really don't know how many complaints you have? I mean, it's good I would suggest recording the complaints on a specific employee. It kind of shows the issue we're having with that employee if we would note the complaints.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. I thought you were asking if we were actually recording the physical phone
No,
calls. No, we're not doing that. We are documenting when there is a complaint about a particular employee. Yes, that is being documented, and that's being put in that employee's file, and that comes into consideration when it's evaluation time.
I'm sorry, Mark. Do you have any other questions?
yeah, has the company putting in the new meters straightened out all the problems they was having a couple weeks ago?
They are getting a little bit better with the install issues. We're going back and finding that installers that were here a year ago that they got rid of, did some things that they shouldn't have done, and now they're having to go back and fix the problems that they had with that company. So they did commit to me that they were going to go back and check the installs that was done by that particular company that they fired a year ago. And so they are going back to check on those things. It's a struggle.
Yeah, because I know I talked to you about one problem they had, and if it wouldn't have been somebody who knew what to check, say it was a elderly lady or something, she'd have had to call a appliance repair person, and who knows what she'd have had to pay, and not knowing that it was the water meter hookup that caused the problem.
Yes, sir.
Do we have an end date to that project?
Their goal is to be done by August of this year. I think that's a pretty optimistic goal, but they will finish before the end of the year.
And along those lines on that contract, after the last response we had from Aquametric about the 9 or 10 things that they were going to adjust on their protocol, I'm not sure how accurate they are adjusting them, but for instance, when they put in a meter and the meter leaks and the concern is expressed that they got a leaking meter, and we go out there and it's on the customer side, but they just put the meter in. So just because the leak is on the customer side, they put the meter in and caused the leak on the customer side. So I'm hoping that we're going back and making them correct those leaks, as well as when they break parish infrastructure that Inframark has to go back out and repair, that we are keeping a running total of that and back charging that company for those damages to our system.
Inframark has been instructed not to repair any of those leaks. It goes back to Aquametric. They're responsible for that. I'm sending them back to handle those issues. If it's a leak at the meter, and it's something they did with the install, they're responsible for it, and they're going to maintain it and fix it.
Well, I'll give you an example. The hall over there on Hunt Street, they had to call a plumber out and pay $70. And the plumber came out and said, look, it's not your fault, it's the installer's fault. And they jumped on me about the $70. And I went over to the department and said, look, I had to get a plumber out. I mean, they had a leak over there. And the first thing I got out of there was, but it was on the customer side. Well, it was on the customer side, and I'm just repeating myself of what I said a few minutes ago. But they had to get a plumber out there to verify, that issue.
I'm not aware of that particular.
It's right there by the Spur station, the hall across the street,
American Legion?
American Legion.
Okay.
And,
I wasn't made aware of that situation.
Okay, well, I just wanted to point that out to make sure that, the administration is making sure that the company is fulfilling its obligations. But,
We are having weekly calls with Aquametrics and with the install group to make sure that they're following those guidelines.
All right, any other comments or questions?
Yes.
Ms. Newberry?
I do have a question. Since we're not cutting off anybody's water because they're not paying, is the delinquent amount increasing, I'm assuming?
It had, yes, ma'am. We're back to where we can do disconnects now. So we are disconnecting people's water when they're delinquent and refuse to pay their bills. So we're in the process of trying to get a lot of those people caught up and working on payment plans with them and things like that.
Well, you're seeing a lot of people that's not paying the $7 on the bill?
I have had a couple people put notes in their bills with their payment saying that they were going to deduct the $7 off of their payment and just pay for their water. It's still going to be a past due balance on their water bill. I'm not aware of a lot, but there's been a handful.
Well, what, Mr. Newberry?
I just was going to make a statement. I know when we have new fees, it's very challenging, and it's it's hard for a lot of people to get accustomed to that, and it's hard to get them to understand it. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Okay. I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
Got me on the $7 here. This is what it was. Today's agenda, we have some items for consideration that changes the policy to temporary trailers paying half of the fee. Now, I'm not sure where that legislation is gone, but the number that was given is $37,000 that it negatively affects the mosquito control department.
That's correct.
And is that based on what the amount of temporary trailer spaces that we have, or the temporary housing that we have?
Yes, sir. It's based on temporary transient housing. So it would be, for instance, like the fishing lodges down the road that have 16 trailers in a particular spot. Rather than them paying the full per connection fee, they would pay half the per connection fee. So instead, say they had a 2-inch meter, it would be $10 per connection. Instead of paying $160 a month, they would pay $80 a month for those lodging type places that are rentals.
So we have a listed designation of which ones we're going to be charging 50% versus 100%?
We have a commercial list, and we went through it and looked at the ones that would qualify under the ordinance, and yes, that's what that was based
You
on.
forward that list to us?
Yes, sir.
Do they get a break on their water hookups?
No.
You got 10 trailers in that 1 meter, they got 10 hookups, right?
They got 10 connections, yes, sir.
And they pass that bill on to the renter, right? So
Well, they could, yes. They could very well.
It just
This
seems
is-
like a small number to me for the $37,000 for an annual amount.
So it's only for transient rentals. It's not for a trailer park where somebody has a space that would live there full-time. So it's only for places that would be rented out on a per-day basis rather than on a yearly basis.
So what about in the marina where you have a bunch of camps? Do they have 1 meter, or do they have meters for each camp, like in Venice?
I'm not exactly sure. I would have to go back and look and see.
are they paying a hookup fee for every houseboat in the marina?
I don't know that either.
Okay, well,
Venice Marina does have several connections that they pay for. I don't know exactly what the number is.
Yeah, but like you said, if I got a trailer park with 10 hookups in it, I got to pay for 10 hookups. If they got 5 meters in the Venice Boat Harbor, but there's 1,000 boats hooked to it, that's each a hookup, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
So they should be paying just like the trailer park, huh?
They should, yes, sir.
If you don't mind, would you look into that a little bit further and make sure we understand the ramifications of what we're asked to be passing today? Because it's confusing to me when we talk about transient locations, and maybe if you send a list to us, it'll be a little clearer. But, I know, for instance, you go down to the new temporary park right there in the Jesuit Bend. They got maybe 100 trailers in there or whatever. And, they're in and out. So I don't know how many meters they have there, but if they got 1 meter there, or if they got 100 meters there.
I don't know that one in particular. I don't know if they're paying, if they have one main meter and they're paying for 100 connections, or if they have a meter at each location.
It seems that there's a lot of unknowns right now, so I'm going to ask the author to defer to the legislation this afternoon so we can get a better feel for it. But thank you for your comments, and if you
Well,
can.
I got, let's just say that trailer park with the 100 meters that people come in and out. He just pays it once a month. If he's got 100 hookups to that meter, he pays it once a month. Not if this trailer stays here 2 days, moves out, and another one comes in, then goes out a couple days later. He doesn't pay for each one of them, right? He just pays for the
Pays the bill once a month.
main hookup.
Yes, sir.
So he could be getting that 200 trailers in there a month, and
Well, let me ask you, so those temporary parks, does the mosquito truck go into those parks if there's just one or two? I mean, are they just, do they not go? I mean, so that's the question.
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't handle mosquito control. I don't know if Ms. Taylor knows the answer to that question or not.
we getting complaints and people want to see the mosquito trucks now.
Each driver have an assigned area. If that park is in their area, they will spray that park. Okay.
All right, any further comments on this item? None? Thank you. We'll move on.
3A, 3 audits in progress, A, Animal Welfare Society internal audit.
Okay, that's the audit that I'm going to start doing now, unless we are going to decide to revise the audit schedule.
Yes, while we're talking about that, let me throw this out there to the fellow board members here. As you know, that there's some issues revolving around borough pits. One of the fellow council members had sent an email out asking that the audit committee take on the assignment of auditing these borough pits. Earlier today, the parish attorney contacted me asking for the same help to be able to move in that direction. And based on what's on the agenda this afternoon, and if we can come to some agreement in that meeting, I'd like to see if the board is interested in moving in that direction to be able to audit the borough pit operations and the ordinance that's on the book today. It's my opinion that, the borough pit operations in this parish are being operated by judgment and consent decrees. I don't think there's anyone that's operating strictly by the ordinance any longer. I think they're all under some court order or some settlement or something to that effect. So if the board is interested in entertaining that, I would like to see if at the next meeting, or we don't know what the outcome's going to be this afternoon, so it's premature to try to amend it now, but we just had some discussion, so this afternoon we can give the full board some input as to what the audit committee would like to do.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I agree with it too. Mr. Duke, would you be able to handle that? Is that your line of expertise to look at?
I would have to, get with y'all and, make that decision, down the road and see if that's something that would fall under my purview. It probably would, I was talking to Mr. Rousseau. We'd have to come up with some objectives and a game plan and see where we go from there. we would have to, I do a lot of thinking about it. I definitely want to make sure that, we have a good audit of that done. So if I can't do it, I'll be the first one to tell you that I'd like to pass it on to someone else. Or another entity, another maybe professional audit group or something of that nature. I don't know how much that would cost the parish, so I would hope that I'd be able to save the parish some money and handle that.
And along those lines, I think that's going to be some discussion that we'll have at the request of the parish attorney and administration, probably next week. If people can make themselves available for a meeting, we can get to discussing this. One thing that I did ask the parish attorney, that if we were to go in this direction, I would expect that the legal department would be behind us and back us up on searching of documents for the audit. And I was led to believe that the Borough Pit ordinance allows audits.
Right.
So if we send an audit request for contracts, so forth, that the compliance be made, and if the ordinance does allow that the legal department be ready and stand up to support that effort if that's what they choose to do.
Right.
Anyway, to move along, you want to go ahead? I'm sorry, but I thought it'd be a good time to interject that when you open that up.
Okay, the last 3 follow-up audits I have is PPG leased property in boat harbors, time and attendance, and the YMCA. And I plan on handling those during the March meeting.
Okay, so we'll have those at the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'll make a motion to
Accept the minutes?
do we have to motion to put it on the agenda, on his list?
Not yet. I think it'd be premature till we go with direction the council wants to go this afternoon on the ordinances that are on the table.
Yeah, most of the time when I am dealing with outside entities, we have to make sure that I can get the data in order to review it. A lot of times they just won't give it to me unless, we subpoena them or, do something of that nature. So, we really have to get that covered before I jump into it.
I think that we can align that up for next week's discussion with the legal department and make sure that if we decide to add it to our list, that we can do it at the next meeting and go from there. But I brought it up for discussion to see if the members are agreeable to do something to that degree. Do you want to make a motion?
Make a motion to accept the minutes from the January 14th, 2021 meeting.
Motion by Mr. Konovich, a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Newberry. And the machine, any discussion on the minutes from anyone? None. Machine is open. Let the record reflect that the minutes for January 14, 2021 meeting are adopted 3-0.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Commissioner Roussel, what about these other items?
We're going to hold off till the next meeting. The motion to adjourn has been offered, the second,
Second.
and the machine is open. Let the record reflect that the meeting is adjourned at 2:05.